Well, let's get more now on the story we brought to you a little earlier. And a new report says that the gap between the haves and have-nots is growing for the first time in a decade. The Education Policy Institute is warning that children in affluent areas are 18 months ahead of their peers by the time they finish GCSEs. Well, joining me now is Neil Leitch, who's the Chief Executive of the Early Years Alliance. Thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News this morning. Now, it's pretty staggering, isn't it, to hear this, particularly at a time when COVID-19 has exposed that gap between rich and poor. What's going on here?
Well, I have to say, first of all, that, I'm disappointed, but I'm certainly not surprised. I mean, whilst it seems like a shock, those of us working in this particular area know that the gap has been increasing for years and years. And this is a result, frankly, of underinvestment and a lack of any strategy. I mean, we go from one crisis to the next, and there is no structure in place. So, I think it was Einstein that said insanity was, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. Well, now the consequences are coming home.
And the worrying thing is that we've been talking about this for so long now, talking about closing that gap. When are we going to stop talking and start really walking the walk?
Well, it needs investment, Vanessa. And the reality is, as I say, that the sector, and particularly the early years, has been neglected for a decade. We seem to think that support and education starts at the school gates. When anybody who knows anything about children's life chances and their future will know that you basically start in the earliest years and you will get the biggest return on human capital investment. Rather than trying to fix things, you prevent them happening. And we have been underfunded, and even throughout this pandemic, when it's been absolutely clear that childminders and nurseries have been, part of our national infrastructure, still we're neglected. Everything that comes out of government is about schools. Just a couple of days ago, another award to schools. And I'm not criticising schools, but this has to have some equity, and that does not exist. And you need to start at the very, very earliest opportunity.
And what impact then has the recent A-level fiasco and, of course, the GCSE and the government's U-turn, what impact has it had on students from poorer backgrounds? Some of them may have missed out on going to university, and they could have been the first in their families to go.
Well, I think it's evident, in terms of the disadvantage, and this EPI report has again just highlighted the fact that if you happen to come from an area of disadvantage, then basically you will struggle. We did a survey just a few weeks ago of early years providers, and 1 in 4 basically said that they were unlikely to be around in 12 months' time. Now, when you looked at areas of deprivation, that figure increased to 1 in 3. They are the very parts of the country where you would argue that in terms of social mobility, you need additional resources. What we're seeing is, because of the poor investment and because there is no policy that basically sustains this, we're seeing providers move out of those areas. So the position will get worse. It happens to be that, early years basically transmits all the way throughout your life. And that will be the consequence. Children will suffer.
Neil Leitch, Chief Executive of the Early Years Alliance, thank you very much for your time this morning.
You're welcome.